Now I want to spend a few minutes talking about green burial and what green burial is not, by describing aspects of conventional burial. Again, conventional burial is the cemeteries that we see in our landscape these days. The most significant difference between conventional and natural burial has to do with embalming and containers. There are no state laws requiring embalming for every death. Some states require embalming or refrigeration of the body if the body is not buried or cremated within a certain time, or when the body crosses state lines, such as Alaska and Alabama. There are 5 states, California, Idaho, Kansas, Minnesota, and New Jersey, that require embalming if the body crosses state lines and is carried by a common carrier like plane or train. Massachusetts does not have any regulations about this. The funeral homes often require embalming for viewing, but it is their policy of the individual funeral home. Again, it's not the law. So there's higher risk of embalmers being diagnosed with ALS. The embalming fluids are very toxic and carcinogenic, and they also are very harmful to the earth. That was one of the things when I read Mark Harris's book that struck me the strongest, was all the things we put in the ground, thinking that they're all taken care of, but actually they do contaminate the ground, and it's a danger for the environment. So the use of concrete liners or burial vault is not recommended, or is not required by state law either. They may be required under the rules and regulations of a cemetery. The purpose of the liners is to prevent the grave from collapsing after it's dug before the body is placed in the grave, and also to reduce the risk of cave-ins when they mow with a heavy equipment over the graves, and to help maintain the flat lawn area. The caskets are made with hardwoods like oak and mahogany or steel are still common. These materials may not be sustainably sourced or biodegradable, and the chemicals in the varnish eventually leach into the ground. These conventional caskets are designed to protect the body from the elements, but in reality, the body is going to decompose regardless. Next slide, please. So here are examples of conventional burial versus natural burial, prepping of the cemetery. On the left, the vault looks like metal, but it very well could be concrete with paint that's painted to look like metal. And on the right, the shovels are in the ready for family and friends to take part in the ritual of filling in the grave. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the Green Burial Council is a national organization, and they certify cemeteries at 3 levels. We're going to talk about all 3 of these. First one is hybrid cemetery, natural cemeteries in the middle, and then the conservation cemetery. So hybrid cemeteries are those typically in municipalities doing conventional burials with grave liners, and they also may have a separate section for green burial, or they may allow fill-in graves for green burial. Next slide, please. So this is a picture on the right. I know it's Mount Auburn, and this is like a fill-in graves that in the lawn. And then they have large stones where they have all the names of the folks in the lawn. So where those planters are, those flowers, there's a new grave there. They do a very good job. of tuck in, as many of the hybrid cemeteries do, to tuck the green burials in between the graves. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of our Massachusetts Cemeteries searchable database. It's on our website, and there's the address there. Since 2017, Green Burial Massachusetts volunteers have been contacting cemetery operators to find out if they offer green burial. Many of these cemeteries that offer green burial are considered hybrid. We publish these results on our website and update it frequently. There are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and so it's a huge project. So if you'd like to participate in this project, please let us know. We'd love to have you as a volunteer. And you may notice that Barnstable is not in this database. In 2018, I was asked to come to speak with the DPW folks in Barnstable to talk about green burial. I was a resident from Marsden Mills. And so I did. And I spoke with Dan St. Pierre and Daniel Santos about the possibility of their including green burial in one of their cemeteries. They were actually very interested. And then in follow-up, I found that there's not a lot of progress been made. I suppose some of the issue could be because of COVID, but they are considering the Mosswood Cemetery, I think that's in Katuitt, as a possible site for green burial. So I have contact information for these folks. If you're interested, it would be good if you are a resident of Barnstable County and would like to see green burial in your own town. Many towns have offered green burial to their residents, but they don't have room to offer it to a lot of people. There is a cemetery in Sharon, Mass. that does offer green burial to non-residents. Also Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. And we'll talk about a natural cemetery next in Maine. Next slide, please. So natural cemeteries adhere to strict ecological impact statements to ensure the soil is not degraded, plant diversity, water quality, and ecological habitat are protected. Over on the left here is Green Springs, and it's a 100-acre former farm located outside of Ithaca, New York. And it was I went to visit that with a friend, and that was my first introduction to Green Cemetery. Cedar Springs, over on the right, is in Leamington, near Portland, Maine. It's not too far to drive. Cedar Brook is a 150-acre tree farm with 2 acres set aside for green burial in the woods. It's lovely. This is where our family brought my husband Dennis in 2014. With a burial permit, we transported Dennis in a lovely pine box in a rented van to Maine. He is from Maine, so it made sense. Our sons were very pleased with the experience, and they said to me, "Mom, we wouldn't want to do it any other way." Next slide, please. So conventional cemetery operate in partnership with a non-profit conservation organization. This is Ramsey Creek. It was the first green cemetery in the modern cemetery movement. And it opened in 1996 on 33 acres. There are all levels of green cemeteries all over the United States. And according to the Green Burial Council, there are 300 certified cemeteries in the United States. Next slide, please. So this is about a cemetery. We hope to have a cemetery in Massachusetts that anyone could use, and it's going to be a conservation cemetery. And we're working with a land trust partner, Kestrel Land Trust, to open the first cemetery, conservation cemetery in Massachusetts. And we've been at it for a number of years. We have a major donor, a business plan, and a great team of people, including soil scientists and land conservationists. Newsflash: Green Burial, Massachusetts is currently in the permitting process for the parcel of land in Northampton, West Hampton area. Stay tuned. We hope to be able to announce the purchase of land. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a summary. Green Burial, Massachusetts, and green burial can be done in many ways. That's what the point of this slide is. It requires preparation and planning and time. Some funeral directors will help you arrange a green burial, and others will not. So do your research before you need a burial. So there's many levels. So you could completely use the services of a funeral director, and on their price list, it's not green burial, but it's classified under immediate burial handled by a funeral director. Or you could choose a funeral home with assistance of home funeral with the assistance of a funeral director. Or you could choose a home funeral with the assistance of a home funeral guide. Or if you really have done your research and planning, you can use your family can have a family directed home funeral. Next slide, please. So we get a lot of questions about cremation. Is cremation green? Well, cremation has become a popular choice, even bypassing conventional burial. According to the Cremation Association of North America, in 2018, there were a rate of 53% cremations. It's predicted an upward trend to 59% by 2023. The National Funeral Directors Association forecast cremation rate to be 80% by 2035. These rates do not include the statistics for after the COVID deaths, so it may be even higher. The burial of cremation remains does take up a smaller footprint than a full body burial, but cremation is not particularly environmentally friendly due to the use of fossil fuels to run the retort for 2 to 3 hours at 1600 degrees, and the release of carbon dioxide and emissions from mercury from dental fillings into the atmosphere. Cremated remains are made of bones, which are mostly dry calcium phosphate and some other minor minerals such as the salts of sodium and potassium. Hence, they are not recommended growth medium for plants. Businesses are creating products with the intention of making cremation remains appear green. I'm sure you've seen the advertisements. If anyone is interested in the other alternative for flame cremation, I do have information about alkaline hydrolysis or natural organic reduction. Next slide, please. So here are a few resources that you might be interested in. The top one is the Green Burial Council. That's the national organization. And then there's the Conservation Burial Alliance. And the Valley Conservation Cemetery Project is will be the website that we use to make announcements about the Massachusetts Green Burial Cemetery. And then there's the Home Funeral Alliance. And then there are two local funeral guides